Well, thanks everyone for coming. Tonight, we'll be doing a presentation on good money habits, turning your first investment into a real estate portfolio, and more importantly, how to even get your first investment. So I'll pass it out to Lane, and he's going to talk about the top 3 money habits and some tips as well.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of money. You go to YouTube, put in good money habits, you're gonna get tens of thousands of videos. A lot of it good advice. The 3 that I had to narrow it down to 3 just because it's very difficult to retain all the information, even if it's really good information. So tip number 1, this is, I think, one of the most important tips. And if you want to be rich, this is one way to cheat, and it's a really good life hack, is to start smoking. And the reason why you start smoking is because it really builds really strong habits. So now the inspiration of this is the wealthy barber, David Chilton. He was on the Dragon's Den, the precursor to the Canadian version of the Shark Tank. But he also wrote a book in the 90s, I believe it was. I read it in the early 2000s. So that's where I get my inspiration from for this particular tip. So it's the 10% solution, which has been around for thousands of years. Save 10% of your income, start early, invest it. It's a great way to be comfortable at retirement. You can enhance that by one of the strategies he promotes is pay yourself first right off your paycheck so that it makes it easier to manage that. We've all probably heard that before too. This is kind of the advanced technique. Now, he didn't specifically say this, but I know this is what he meant, is start smoking. So this is, again, an advanced technique to pay yourself first, or the 10% solution is smoking. So step 1, start smoking about a pack a day. That's pretty normal for smokers if you've known any smokers. If you're already a smoker in here, you've got a bit of a head start, almost a year head start on everybody else. So you're gonna have a couple of weeks where you're gonna be coughing, it's gonna be awful, but then you're gonna start to get used to it. Then you're gonna really start to actually enjoy it a little bit. One of the most important things is that you have a full, unwavering commitment to smoking. And this we know is possible because we've all seen people from different backgrounds be able to figure this one out. So after a year, you're not going to be able to live without it. It's going to become part of your identity. This is some of the differences between most people and committed smokers. So if it's minus 20 out, most of us want to stay inside. In fact, if it's Sunday, we sometimes don't even leave our house. But a smoker, they'll go outside multiple times a day, right? They're going to go outside for a walk on their lunch break, on their coffee break. They're going to make sure they do it. They're very committed to this. We'll make the excuse, it's too cold, we're not going to go outside. Feeling tired? Maybe I should just sit on the couch. Not a smoker. In fact, in hospitals, when you talk to nurses, people after surgery, they want to get them mobile as quickly as possible. And they'll tell you, the nurses, the people that will get mobile due to their commitment to smoking, they're the ones that get mobile a lot faster than the average person. So don't have money for a sandwich or coffee, on your lunch break. Smokers will pack a PB&J or whatever sandwich they want. They'll go out, they'll have a smoke, maybe another smoke on the way back. If they have an hour lunch, they might be able to knock 3 off because they've got a commitment to smoke a pack a day. So don't have enough money this week. Smokers will always find a way. This crosses all lines. The rich people, they smoke, right? Blue collar workers working on a construction site, on their breaks, where do you find them? If they're smokers, they're committed to smoking. They don't go sit in their truck and warm up. They stand and they have a cigarette. Now, young people often work a full-time job. They'll go get a second job busting tables at a restaurant because they got to pay for those smokes. It's $500 a month, almost closer to $600 now. But they'll commit to doing it. Even a couch surfing cousin, anybody have one of those crash on their couch ever for 3-4 weeks between one of their multiple temporary rental solutions? Funny enough, they are so committed to this that they will always find a way to get $500 a month because they've committed to that smoking. So that's step 1. Start smoking, embrace it for a full year. After that year's over, stop smoking, invest that money in the stock market instead. 40 years later, you have $1.8 million. So that's the key. These are the real numbers. It's 30 years, it's 800,000. Still a lot of money. Still life-changing, to be honest with you. And those are the stats. You you could use ChatGPT or just punch it in and calculate it yourself. Either way, you're going to end up with these being the numbers of a 40-year smoker. What's that? Yeah, it's 8% return is the number we've used, which if you want to get to that in 25 years, you could just be a more active investor like most of us in this room are with real estate. You're going to be able to use that $500 a month to actually, and at a higher return is going to make a significant difference. But the reason why I talk about smoking, right, because we've all got our, our pack of cigarettes or a version of that. For me, when I was younger, I used to go have nachos, have a few beer, then go play pool, drink some beer with friends. And at the end of kind of one winter, Fred and I were like, yeah, man, we spend like, $800-900 a month, and this was 20 years ago, on like beer and nachos. So we started playing tennis instead. He started hunting in the hunting season. I started going to the gym. That was just, I switched my habits up. My life didn't get worse. I still socialized at the gym or playing tennis, obviously a lot healthier. And that's, my version of that. The reason I like cigarettes is because it's the same. A pack of smoke is pretty common for somebody who's a smoker. And it costs the same amount for that rich person, somebody making 140 grand a year or somebody making 50. A pack of smokes is still the same cost. The quality of cigarettes, because the taxes are the majority of the actual cost, they both smoke a pack of cigarettes. You 3 times your income, 3 times the price that you pay for your cigarettes. So it's very common. And it helps out with the idea that, well, how am I going to save $500 a month? Like, I don't make enough. I only make 58 grand a year or 72 grand a year. My everything that I have is already accounted for. All my money is accounted for. It is actually possible now. Maybe it's the second job. Maybe it is, maybe it's cutting back on something else. But it just goes to show that, like, why I like to use cigarettes, not to make light of someone trying to quit, but because it's so uniform across different classes, different ages, it is the exact same amount of money. And we all know people who we know can't afford life and are struggling with money and maybe are couch surfing, and yet we know they smoke a pack a day. So it is actually possible to come up with that money if you need it. Now, I recommend everyone do at least this. Having said that, if you're a starving student and you're in your last semester and you're putting your money on credit cards at 18% because you got to finish school, obviously don't start investing $500 a month in something that's going to earn you an 8% return if it's costing you 18, which a starving student may do. So don't, but at the very least, make it $2 a day. Make it, $50 a month. You want to make a commitment to something just so that you can actually start that habit. So it is good to start that habit early. So tip number 2, that is avoid lifestyle creep. And I actually like to change this a little bit to like adjust lifestyle creep. So the definition of lifestyle creep, I don't know if we actually put the definition there. Yeah. So, lifestyle inflation, it's often called, but it's basically as you get raises, as we see people get raises from being, low income to they start driving brand new cars every couple of years. They start spending more money on clothing. They have to, in some cases, the only person who knows they're wearing expensive clothing are them, unless they tell everybody, and sometimes they do. And we've all done this ourselves, right? Instead of eating out once a month or never eating out, we convert to eating out, 2-3 times a week. Or in some cases, I know people that eat out, 4 or 5 times a week. So it's because instead of it being a luxury that you look forward to, it's become just a habit. That's just what they do because it's easier. And this one is new. The sinister thing about this one is it's so frictionless that even people with no money do it. Like this food, if you have these apps on your phone and you do it more than once a week, take the apps off. And every time you order it, then delete it from your phone again. Make it a little harder to actually do than just pop it in, spending 30 seconds ordering more food and blowing the money on it. These ones, the amount of people that I see when I see, as a mortgage broker, I see bank statements and I see Visa records just because I have to find out where down payment and everything is coming from. And the amount of money people who don't make much money spend on food delivery apps is incredible. So what I suggest to people do, so the pay yourself first habit, that means take it off your paycheck. Either you could do that, with RSPs or with your employer sometimes in order to build that habit of pay yourself first, and then whatever's left in your account, you just budget within that. Because, you know, what I see is I see someone making $60,000 a year, then they get a raise from 70, then they get a raise to 90, then 110, then 140. And I've seen this over their lifestyle, and they have the same amount of savings, zero, at the end of every month. And it's like, well, you know, you used to live on 60, and now you make 140. How is it that you still have the same amount of savings? You would think you'd be able to figure it out, but that's where the lifestyle creep comes in. And there is something to say, like, you don't want to live like you're poor or like you're a starving student your entire life. You are working hard and you have earned the right to enjoy part of life. So the way I describe it to people is, you got to pay yourself for it. You do have to take the time to set up your banking so that if you're paid on Thursday at midnight, that on Friday at 1 o'clock in the morning, all your transfers happen, so that money never hits your account. So let's say you're the trades and you're making $28 an hour, gets you next level, so you get an automatic raise to 32. So that is $8,000 a year. So take half of it and put that towards your investment. And then the other half, leave it in your bank account, spend it, blow it. You're gonna, you know, then you can go for dinner a couple times. Maybe it's a once a year vacation that you used to not be able to take. So you can still improve your lifestyle constantly, but there's two impacts. One, you're increasing your investment substantially. You're also still enjoying an increase in lifestyle that you've earned, but you can do so guilt-free. You don't have to worry about spending that money because you've already taken care of the investment side of it. So when you book that vacation, you're not in the back of your head, you're not feeling guilty that you could have invested that money, because if it's in your bank account and you can afford it and you're doing the investment side over here, and you're taking that half of that new raise and you're putting it there, you know, guilt-free, you're already doing it. So it gives you kind of extra enjoyment in that, in that investment. In that vacation or that car that you like, or whatever it is, or your dinner's out, whatever it is that you like. This is an advanced technique again. This is the idea that if you really like, say, a fancy car, cars are one of the things that, one of the worst things that people spend money on. It's the most impactful. Like if you drive lease a new car every 3 years, compared to if you buy a 3-year-old car and drive it for 3 years, because the first 3 years you lose half the value of a vehicle, give or take, depending on the brand and everything. But if you just take a 3-year-old vehicle and you drive it for 3 years and then continue to do that, you'll retire 12 years earlier than if you actually just lease a brand new vehicle. And there's a whole bunch of excuses why, the rate's better, then I don't have to worry about warranty. And I've never bought a new car. The newest car I've ever bought is 3 years old. Between 3 and 4 is my sweet spot. And I've been doing that for 20 years. I've never once had a transmission go, never once had a motor go. I've never once used a long-term drive trade warranty, anything like that. So I drive my vehicles till they're past 10. I just don't care about cars enough. But if you do, like Anthony, he loves nice cars. He races cars on the weekends. Like, he's a car guy. That's part of his reward for himself. A lot of us just go out and buy a brand new car because it's just what we do, just to drive to work and back. So if you're enjoying it like Anthony, it's a worthy spend. So just make sure you know what you're spending your money on, whether it's worth it to you or not. But one of the keys to doing that, even like Anthony likes to do, like, okay, if I want to buy an expensive car, I'm going to go find an investment, find an old duplex. Then I'm going to work my tail off renovating it myself over the weekends and all my spare time. And then I got a property that's cash flowing really well because I put some suites in it. And that's what I'm going to use to pay for my car. And he sets up payments that are well within the cash flow of the vehicle. So that's one technique to kind of, one, you're getting still what you want is the car that is beyond what is needed. So be considered a luxury, but one that you want. But you're also doing so while building an investment portfolio, because it'll help drive you to do it, but also enjoy it when you're, and again, guilt-free driving it because you know you've actually increased your net worth in the process of actually getting the vehicle. Tip number 3, track spending. This one sucks. Like it feels bad. It's not that hard to just build a spreadsheet. So it's harder than it seems because, again, this one is, so I had my cousin and he was really broke and he was actually living with me for a while. And then he, went to live on his own. I knew what his income was. He was in one of my properties. So I actually knew all of his income. I knew all of his expenses. And I'm like, I just don't know how where's your money going? Like, you should have lots of money left over. And And then I would notice that he had an awful lot of skip the dishes stuff when I was there. And at one point we had realized he was spending 55% of his take-home income just on skip the dishes. You know, that included like lunches at like Tim Hortons for his food. So it's not even great food. And it's like, well, you know, there's a fridge in the property you're working in. You can just, you know, bring some bread, bring some cheese, like go to the grocery store a couple times a week, like make your own sandwich. Like you don't need to go to Tim Hortons every day and spend $18 like breakfast and lunch and then skip the dishes that night. He was spending 55% of his income on that alone. And he could have, you know, that could have been 15% of his income in terms of his overall food budget. And as soon as he did it, he started doing that when he saw how much it was. He just assumed, whatever, I'm spending $20, I'm hungry. I'm going for lunch, that's what people do. But he had no idea that he was spending so much. So he adjusted very quickly, just swore off, skipped the dishes, deleted it from his phone, started taking sandwiches to work. So made a big difference for him. But he never would have known that if I hadn't kind of forced him into just tracking it, which is a really simple spreadsheet. Just 31 days in a month or 30 days in whatever month it is. Ideally, if you spend everything in your credit card and your bank charges, use that and work backwards. Because as soon as you measure it, you start to manage it. As soon as you start tracking your skip the dishes and your eating out at all, you'll start spending less because you'll automatically know like, I don't want to spend this. I'll put that on my spreadsheet later and admit that that's what I'm doing. So if you work backwards a few months, fill in the gaps, then you'll find out where you're actually spending the money. And whether skip the dishes or having Tim Hortons for lunch is important enough to absorb that kind of income from you. I actually knew a guy who was spending about $4,500 on takeout for his whole family. They were just, so he's a mortgage broker. It's like, you realize like you're working really hard, working extra hours. You're really like he was a hardworking guy, and he'd work weekends, nights, everything, and realized that a good chunk of what he was doing was just to pay for this takeout, because it'd be $100 and something every time he'd get takeout and bring it home and the family would eat it. So family of 5, and then I think a partner of one of his kids. Like it was just an excessive amount, but it was $4,500 a month. Really easy to cut down to about $1,000. So eating out is between a fifth and a quarter of what it would cost to make you that same food yourself at home. So instead of going out 5 times a week with your partner, you can start watching some cooking shows and make your food yourself. And then maybe you do it once or twice on the weekend. And then it's actually something you look forward to versus something you just do as a habit. So tracking is important because you'll actually get to see where your money is going and where it's not that hard to actually adjust. For me, I already kind of mentioned mine, but this is even still what I have now. I've got a family of 4. My kids love going to restaurants. We go to either Olive Garden for those stupid breadsticks or Joey's or something. My son loves the salmon there. And our kids used to just have like a side. Now they're growing up a little bit. They eat a little bit more, still 7 and 9, but it's like $200. It's like, man, am I really dropping $12,000 a year at the Olive Garden just for my, just to go out once a week with my kids? And I can afford it, but it's also a lot of money. Like there's something about that number that we could be doing. We could take a couple of European vacations probably not with a family of 4, but we could take one nice European vacation once a year for that amount of money. So is it really that worth it, especially when it's become just more of a Sunday habit than something the kids actually look forward to and enjoy? Again, me at 19, spending $800 a month on nacho and beer. It's when you track it, when you measure it, you manage it. It's kind of the first, when you measure it, you manage it. The first rule of management. This one seems like it's bad. This one's actually a good one. This one, you're like, I have to face reality, and that's going to suck. But it's really good for you. The tracking your net worth is something that is really good. So there's 2 reasons to track it. One, so I had a friend once, and she was always just overwhelmed with debt. She had taxes from when she was self-employed and wasn't charged taxes like from her employer. So she just built up taxes because she hadn't been saving to pay them. And that was on her for like 5 years, just slowly trying to catch up. Then a new car, And she just like, yeah, I made bad decisions. I'm just overwhelmed. I can't think about it. I'm like, okay, well, your car's 3.5 years old now. So every single month, you're paying $600 a month, but your car's only going down in value maybe $150 a month now. So you're actually gaining net worth every month. Like it sucks for you and you're still negative net worth. But once I forced her into actually tracking it, she started realizing like, oh, like every month was like, oh, I'm negative 17. Oh, now I made my payments. Now I'm negative 16. And every quarter she was gaining 3. And then it got to the point where she wouldn't spend money on anything, doing anything. It was used to be like, well, I'm already in the hole. Why not just use my credit card to buy this dress or to go for a weekend with my friends? And once she started getting close to zero from having a really negative net worth that she never thought she'd get out of, all of a sudden she started like hoarding money. She didn't want to do anything. Her dopamine hit was no longer coming from buying a dress that she couldn't afford and would probably use once, if ever. The dopamine hit became how close she was getting to zero and then starting to get a positive net worth on the other side of it. So the net worth thing is really good because it can show the direction of where you're going no matter where you started. The other thing is us as investors, because sometimes it can be done like, man, I've been doing this for like 7 years and like my life hasn't changed. Like, all I'm doing is working hard. Like I got these 3 rentals, I'm dealing with tenants on weekends, I'm doing renovations. My life hasn't changed. Like I'm still working hard. Now I got just extra stuff to do on the weekends. But once you start actually tracking it, you realize, okay, well now I get 3 mortgages and they're being paid off at $1,200 a month. That's $3,600 a month. All of a sudden it's $40,000 a year. And sure, all your cash flow just goes in improving the property, but now the property is kind of slowly going up in value as a result of that. So then all of a sudden you're like, hey, wait a second. Like I make 85 grand a year, but my not even including any kind of appreciation, I'm making $60,000 a year on my investment portfolio. So you can start to see where the math is adding up. Like even though you're not retired, you're still living the same way that you were, but you can see the pathway at $60,000 a year, which of course, just based on how amortizations work, it's going to be 62 the next year, then 64, then 60 is just going to continue. So you can start to see the pathway of like, oh, wow, I'm making more money now from my investments, especially if you count appreciation in there, because that bumps up every few years. Then you're going to start to see where you actually have your income or net worth is actually growing more as a result of your investment portfolio than it is your income, even though it doesn't necessarily feel like it sometimes because nothing is dramatically changing. But you are getting closer to that point where your investment can eventually pay for your entire lifestyle. I'm going to hand this over to Anthony. This is his portion.
Yep, thanks. So now that Lane talked to us about some of the tips and good money habits, I'll talk about some mistakes you can make with money. So first one there is trying to time the market. And this one we see a lot, and it's very difficult to not get caught into that, because that is a dopamine hit, right? It's like the prospect of making either quick money or trying to get, buy the right time. And everyone tells us, right, buy low, sell high. Well, on paper, it's great. And obviously you should try to do that, but in practice, it's quite difficult, right? So then what happens is people get stuck, right? And they get stuck and they tell themselves things like, I'll wait for the crash, right? But then I'll always wait for the crash. And while they're waiting for the crash, other people with investments are getting cash flow, they're getting equity growth, and then they're still waiting on the sideline, right? Then they'll tell themselves, price only go up. So, that's also not the case. So if you're speculating and you're relying on prices going up, then what happens is things like pre-construction condo buyers in Toronto right now, or any stock market cycle that goes down, is people get caught in the middle of it. And then the last thing too is they'll be like, well, this deal's not good enough. I'm going to keep looking for the perfect deal. And as much as obviously you should look for a good deal, we've seen people that 5 years later are still looking for that perfect deal. Well, you could have bought an okay deal 5 years ago and made a lot of money. So that is a huge mistake we see. And then obviously that bottom one, right? I think everyone is can get tempted at times, but you have to try to not give in. Quick, rich scheme, right? If it looks too good to be true, it often is. And we've seen those stories and how they unfold. Second one is mixing up rich and wealthy. It's not the same thing, and it does not look the same either, right? We've all seen the people that have like the flashy cars, fancy cars, fancy watches, clothing. They take vacations all the time. They look like they're rolling in dough. And sometimes these people don't have a single dollar. A lot of time they're actually even negative, right? It's not because you look rich that you have money. It's just because you're spending the money, which sometimes is on credit, right? Where a wealthy person may not look like they're rich, but they actually have the money, right? They'll have assets, they'll have investments, they're providing cash flow, businesses, they can stop working if they want to, where a lot of people on the left side may look rich, but they're trapped in that lifestyle because they're spending so much, right? So that's a really big trap. And we see it, especially Lane in his line of work, right? Is if people coming in, they look like they have money and then they try to buy an investment property and they can't because they're spending all they have, right? So that's a big one. And then further to this, there's a few signs, right? Like I alluded to, it's usually if you look really flashy, it's not always a good sign. Big one, and it kind of tracks with the rich versus wealthy thing, is converting bad debt to good debt, right? There's the extreme of it, which is people that believe that you should not have any debt. I grew up in that kind of households. My parents, unfortunately, especially my mom's side, had lots of debts in their family, and they were struggling because of that. So in my upbringing, there was no debts whatsoever, ever, right? Well, that's a step up from having bad debt, but good debt is really helpful, especially for us as investors. So, it's instead of having car loans and lines of credits that you're using to buy flashy stuff, you want to convert those things into mortgages and HELOCs or line of credit you're using for assets, right? You want to get the return out of that debt. And there's a certain amount that's obviously safe to use, but it is very helpful to have some amount of leverage in investing. And the last one's time value of money. And not a lot of people really think about that. So every dollar you spend today is not the same dollar 10 years from now, right? That amount of money, if you invest it, grows significantly. And that's how I think now about purchases, is if I want to buy a car, if I want to buy whatever it is, I do ask myself, do I want to buy it now and then forego that $30,000 being $90,000 down the road? And sometimes the answer is yes, right? You have to live, you have to enjoy life. But there are other cases where I'll look at something like, yeah, I could buy this, but I'd rather have the growth down the road and then maybe get something else that I'm looking for that's harder to achieve, right? Or harder to attain. So there's an example of this based on, it's actually the same amount of money as the, smoking a pack of cigarettes every day is around $500 a month, give or take. Well, if you invest for 40 years at 8%, it's 1.7 million, give or take, right? And that's if you start at 25 years old. If you only start at 35 because you've been spending for an extra 10 years and you invest the same amount of money, that's 700K, right? So it's an extra 10 year, but it's more than double the return, right? Because of compounding interest. So that's something important to remember. And that also explains some of the known investors like Warren Buffett, for example, that have crazy track record of investing because he started so young and he's pretty old now. So he's had a very long track record. But it applies to all of us, even if it's a small amount of money, right? And now the thing too is you can start at 25 and then stop, let's say at 55, and you're better off than if you started at 35 and stopped at 65, because you still have that compounding interest. And then Santosh will talk about how to grow your portfolio from there.
Yeah, so the good money habits will tie into you getting into your first rental. But one issue a lot of people that we run into is they're tight on cash or qualifying, right? For different reasons. Maybe they're younger and just starting out, just out of school. But how do you get started in your first property? The easiest solution for most people would be to house hack. So what I mean by house hacking is purchase it with as little as 5% down as a principal residence. And that way you can move into either the main floor or the basement suite. And then you rent out the other unit to offset your living costs or pay off a part of the expense, right? And if qualifying is your issue, maybe you don't make quite enough to qualify for the property that you're looking for, partner up with someone. This could be a family member, co-signer, or someone you meet through an investment network, right? Getting into the property sooner gives you a longer runway versus waiting to get into the property years down the road, okay? And if everything else fails, you also have another option. You can look for properties that offer creative financing. So this could be agreement for sale, vendor take back. I see a few wholesalers in the room, so you guys should be familiar with this. You often deal with this kind of stuff. For those who want to know a little bit more about this, the last meetup that we did was with the real estate lawyer, Scott Bollinger. He covered a little bit more about agreement for sales and how they're structured. So do check those out on our YouTube channel if you want to know more about that. Okay, so once you buy your first property, obviously everyone wants to scale, and part of what helps you scale is if the property appreciates in value, right? But if you do nothing and just sit on it, yes, the property would naturally appreciate over time. So if you take a 10, 20-year timeline, most properties tend to appreciate unless you bought something terrible to begin with, like an underperforming condo, okay? But if you bought a detached property in Calgary, for the most part, your property is appreciated, okay? But you don't want to be, sorry?
And cash flow and principal pay down.
Yes, and cash flow and principal pay down. But instead of waiting for this appreciation to happen, you need to force it if you want to scale your portfolio a bit faster. And how do you do that? Do value add improvements, okay? So this could be, in the case of a house with an unfinished basement, you could add a basement suite, okay? You could do room rentals if you're living in one of the rooms or living in one of the units. You could do room rentals, obviously, if you want to do that. Okay. You could add a garage suite if it's possible, and do renovations and make sure they're strategic. Right. Don't do renovations just because it looks fancy and shiny. Make sure they actually add value. And if you're not sure what renovations to do, that's going to add the most value, come and talk to us. We're more than happy to tell you what renovations you want to do. Okay. And this is a rookie mistake that we see. Often a lot of newer investors will go out and buy the cheapest material, right? They'll go to Home Depot or, a big box store, buy the cheapest doorknob and whatever. And within 5 years, this doorknob is like getting stuck, it's sticking. Whereas if you paid a little bit more, got a higher quality hardware, same thing with flooring, they tend to last a lot longer, right? So over the long run, you still do save money. Yes, it's a bit more expensive upfront, but it's better to bite the bullet upfront than having to replace your flooring in a few years down the road. And then this last one is pretty common, especially if you end up buying a tenant-occupied property, and if the previous owner has had tenants in there for a while, often the rents are below market. So you're going to have to go in as a new owner and then raise rents to current market value. Okay? So the BRRRR strategy, how many of you have heard of the BRRRR strategy? Okay, so quite a number of you. So I'm going to quickly just go over this. I mean, there's lots of content out there on this, but I'll touch on this. So this is how you would force appreciate. So strategy works like this. So first you buy a property that's undervalued or has room for improvement, okay? And then you're going to force appreciate. So you're going to do that by doing strategic renovations, okay? That could be adding a basement suite. Maybe there's no garage in the back. You're going to add the garage in the back, and then you could up the rental income that way. And then once you do all that, you're going to rent out your property for top dollar, whatever the market supports in that area, okay? Now that you've got a fully tenanted property, you're going to go to the bank or your lender and say, hey, look, I've got a property that's all done up. It's fully rented at top market rents. I would like to access the equity that I've now built up by doing all this work. And most lenders will give you up to 80% loan to value. So you take that difference and then you pay off your original mortgage, and that's your spread, okay? And now you can take that spread and go buy your next property. Now, one thing I want to let everyone know, in Calgary, it's pretty tough to do a perfect BRRRR. So you're not going to get all the money that you put in back out, but it still gives you access to a good chunk of that money to repeat the process, right? And just a little note here, the older communities in Calgary is where this BRRRR strategy tends to work best. So not in the newer suburbs, like anything essentially outside of the ring road are probably not good candidates for the BRRRR strategy. Exceptions apply, but in general, you want to look at older properties that are sitting on bigger lots, right? So this could be like Fairview, Acadia, Bowness, Huntington, Beddington. I'm just throwing out a few communities out there, okay? And the bungalows and bi-levels work best for these type of projects. Okay, so weathering the storms in real estate, we know that real estate can go up and down, and Calgary especially is known to be a fairly cyclical market. Historically, at least, we're very much tied to oil and gas prices, and our real estate prices were tied to oil and gas. So what we like to recommend is keep 3 to 6 months of expenses per property and set that aside, right? Don't end up blowing that money just because you think it's cash flow, okay? You need to cover your vacancies, especially in an environment like right now. Vacancy rates in Calgary are going up, okay? In the suburbs, for detached properties and basement suites, they're as high as 7 to 8%. Condos, I would say even higher, especially downtown, okay? Unexpected repairs, this is why you need those expenses set aside, because I'm speaking from personal experience. I bought a property and I had a roof leak and I didn't know I needed a roof replacement. $30,000 later, yeah, I had a line of credit with a balance to pay, okay? Furnace repairs as well. These, for some reason, always happen on the eve of a long weekend or on a holiday, okay? Yeah. So I've had a furnace die on Christmas Eve, and it was $6,000 in 2018. Okay. Yeah. And obviously, you want to be able to weather interest rate changes, right? Whether they might be going up or down, who knows with the current situation. But essentially, by having all these kind of covered, it prevents you from being forced to sell under pressure because you can't keep up with the expenses, okay? So you don't want to assume that the market will always be good. Like Anthony was saying, speculators always end up losing in the long run, okay? Can I survive a worst case scenario is a question you need to ask. So you need to stress test your portfolio. So just because it's cash flowing today at whatever numbers you have ran doesn't mean it's always going to be the case, right? So you want to know in a worst case scenario, okay, if prices drop 10%, if rents come down 15%, will I still be able to survive in this environment, okay? And if not, if the answer to that is no, you need to figure out a game plan to make sure you can survive those worst case scenarios, okay? So you want to budget for these higher interest rates with rents drop, which is a good example because right now rents are down pretty much across all quadrants of the city. And some parts of the city are hit much harder, okay? So you want to make sure you can factor all these in. Vacancy, unexpected repairs. If your numbers still work, you're good. And last point here, the strong investors don't just scale their portfolio quickly. They build portfolios that are resilient, okay? That's about it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're going to be sticking around.
Awesome.
Questions?
Thanks for coming.